When 76-year-old Colonel Franklin Hayes walked into St. Mary's Medical Center that Wednesday morning, he had no idea that asking for cancer treatment would lead to the most humiliating experience of his post-war life. The hospital administrator took one look at the elderly man with the cane and immediately assumed his military service was exaggerated, loudly announcing that old guys like this always make up stories about their service for special treatment. What happened next would be captured on security cameras and viewed by millions, because 6 young men in civilian clothes had just witnessed the entire exchange, and they weren't tourists or visitors. They were Navy SEALs returning from deployment. They were about to teach everyone in that hospital what real military brotherhood looked like. The morning sun filtered through the large windows of St. Mary's Medical Center as patients and visitors moved through the spacious lobby. It was just after 9 a.m., and the reception area was busy with the usual mix of scheduled appointments and walk-in patients seeking medical care. Among them, 76-year-old Colonel Franklin Hayes moved slowly with his polished wooden cane, necessity since the shrapnel wounds from Korea and Vietnam had finally caught up with his aging joints. Franklin wore a simple button-down shirt and khaki pants, looking like any elderly gentleman coming in for routine medical care. But folded carefully in his wallet were documents that told a different story: his Silver Star citation from Korea, Purple Heart from Vietnam, and Bronze Star commendation, earned when he saved 23 men during a devastating enemy ambush. Today, he needed something critical: treatment for the cancer that his VA doctor had recommended treating at this private medical center. As Franklin approached the reception desk, he presented his Medicare card and military ID with the same crisp precision he'd maintained throughout his 45-year military career. "Good morning. I'm here for my oncology consultation. My VA doctor referred me here for specialized cancer treatment." The administrator, a woman in her 50s named Karen Johnson, looked up from her computer screen with an expression that immediately shifted from professional courtesy to barely concealed annoyance. After working at St. Mary's for 12 years, Karen had developed what she considered sharp instincts about which patients would cause problems, and something about the elderly veteran triggered all her assumptions. "These types of old veterans don't really belong here," Karen said loudly enough for several other patients in the waiting area to hear, not bothering to lower her voice or show any discretion. "They usually have exaggerated stories about their service and expect special treatment they haven't earned." Franklin felt his face flush with embarrassment as heads turned in his direction. The public nature of the accusation was devastating, especially coming from someone who was supposed to provide medical assistance to anyone who needed it. "Ma'am, I have my VA referral right here," Franklin said quietly, maintaining his composure despite the mounting humiliation. "My doctor specifically referred me to this hospital for cancer treatment because of your oncology department's reputation." Karen examined his Medicare card and VA referral with exaggerated suspicion, holding them up to the light as if she expected to find evidence of fraud. "These old military guys always have complicated stories. You probably don't understand how medical insurance works, and these war stories are usually made up anyway." The words cut deep. Franklin had commanded men in 2 different wars, managed complex military operations, and earned the respect of soldiers and officers alike. But in this moment, he was being treated like he was incompetent and dishonest simply because of his age and veteran status. "Ma'am, I can assure you I understand exactly how my insurance works," Franklin replied, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. "I've been successfully using my VA benefits and Medicare for years now." What Karen didn't know was that Franklin Hayes wasn't just an Medicare patient. He was a highly decorated veteran of both the Korean and Vietnam Wars who had risked his life countless times for his country. More importantly, she didn't know that his former Navy SEAL team members were driving to the hospital at that very moment for their own scheduled medical appointments with the same medical staff. "Look, sir," Karen continued, her voice taking on a condescending tone that carried across the lobby, "I'm not going to be honest with you. We don't usually take complicated veteran cases here, especially not elderly patients who might have unrealistic expectations about their service records. This is a private medical center. You'd be better served at the VA hospital where they're used to dealing with your demographic." The word demographic hung in the air like a slur. Franklin had faced enemy fire without flinching, But this casual dismissal of his worth as a human being and his service to his country cut deeper than any battlefield wound. "Ma'am, my VA doctor specifically referred me here," Franklin said, producing a referral letter from his physician. "This isn't about demographics. This is about getting the specialized cancer treatment that my doctor believes I need." Karen barely glanced at the referral letter before sliding it back across the counter. "These VA referrals don't really mean much to us. Those doctors refer patients here all the time without understanding our patient guidelines. We have standards about who we treat and what kind of cases we accept." By now, other patients in the waiting area were beginning to take notice of the confrontation. Some were pulling out their phones, sensing that something significant was happening. The atmosphere in the lobby had shifted from the usual medical center calm to something more tense and charged. "What kind of standards?" Franklin asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Well," Karen said, lowering her voice slightly, but not enough to prevent nearby patients from overhearing, "we prefer patients who can afford our services without complication. Elderly veteran patients, especially those with these elaborate military stories, often have issues with payment, understanding treatment protocols, and unrealistic expectations about special treatment." The accusation was clear, even if it wasn't stated direct. Franklin was being discriminated against based on his age, veteran status, and insurance type. Everything he had fought for in Korea and Vietnam, freedom, dignity, respect for service, was being trampled by a hospital administrator who had never served her country a single day. But what Karen Johnson didn't know was that Franklin Hayes had friends in high places, and 6 of those friends were about to walk through the front door of St. Mary's Medical Center. Meanwhile, in the parking lot, 6 Navy SEALs from Franklin's old unit were finishing their own medical appointments and preparing to leave the hospital. Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez, Chief Petty Officer David Chen, Petty Officer First Class Robert Washington, Petty Officer First Class Kevin O'Sullivan, Petty Officer Second Class Michael Thompson, and Petty Officer Second Class James Park had all served under Franklin Hayes when he was their commanding officer years earlier. They were at St. Mary's for their own routine medical checkups, but they had no idea that their old commander was inside being humiliated by the administrative staff. Back inside, Karen was escalating her discrimination against Franklin. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We simply don't have the resources to deal with complicated veteran cases today, especially patients who might have unrealistic expectations about their military service. You should try the VA hospital. They're more equipped to handle patients like you." "Patients like me?" Franklin asked, his voice gaining an edge that his soldiers would have recognized. The quiet authority of a man who had commanded respect in life-and-death situations. "You know what I mean," Karen replied dismissively. "Elderly veteran patients with government insurance and exaggerated stories about their service. It's just easier for everyone if you go somewhere more appropriate." That's when the automatic doors of the medical center opened, and the 6 Navy SEALs walked into the lobby. They had finished their appointments and were heading to their cars when Master Chief Rodriguez heard a familiar voice saying, "Ma'am, I'm simply asking for the medical treatment my doctor prescribed." Rodriguez's head snapped toward the reception desk, and his eyes widened as he recognized his old commanding officer Franklin Hayes. But more importantly, he could hear the tone of the conversation, and his military-trained instincts immediately told him that something was very wrong. Rodriguez had served under Franklin in some of the most dangerous missions imaginable, where he'd watched the man risk his life repeatedly to save his soldiers. He knew about Franklin's decorations, his heroism, and his unwavering commitment to serving others. And now he was watching Franklin being dismissed and disrespected by a hospital employee. But before Rodriguez could intervene, the situation was about to get much worse. "Sir, I'm calling security," Karen announced loudly, reaching for her phone. "We have an elderly veteran patient who is being disruptive and refusing to leave the premises. He's insisting on treatment that we've explained we can't provide." The lie was breathtaking in its audacity. Franklin hadn't been disruptive in any way. He had simply asked for medical treatment and tried to maintain his dignity in the face of obvious discrimination. Rodriguez heard every word, and his expression shifted from confusion to anger to a cold fury that his fellow SEALs would have recognized immediately. This was a man who had commanded respect in combat, who understood justice and injustice, and who was watching a decorated veteran being humiliated for no reason other than his age and status as a veteran. "Excuse me," Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed immediately. "I couldn't help but overhear this conversation." Karen looked up, annoyed at another interruption to what she considered her efficient handling of an unwanted patient. "Sir, please take a seat. We'll be with you shortly. I'm currently dealing with a problem patient." "A problem patient?" Rodriguez repeated, his voice dropping to a level that made several nearby patients stop what they were doing and pay attention. "This gentleman appears to be politely requesting medical treatment. How exactly does that make him a problem?" "Well," Karen said, suddenly less confident as she sensed something different about this new arrival, "he's a veteran patient with complicated insurance, and we don't usually handle cases like his." "Cases like his?" Rodriguez pressed, stepping closer to the reception desk. "What makes his case complicated?" Karen glanced around nervously, realizing that her earlier confidence was evaporating quickly. "He's elderly, and veteran patients sometimes have unrealistic expectations about their service records and special treatment." The silence that followed was deafening. Rodriguez looked from Karen to Franklin, and Franklin could see recognition dawning in his old subordinate's eyes. But we need to pause here, because what happened next would not only change how Franklin was treated at St. Mary's Medical Center, it would lead to a complete transformation of the hospital's policies and procedures, because Rodriguez wasn't just any concerned visitor who had witnessed discrimination. He was a man with connections, influence, and a deep understanding of what justice looked like. "Colonel Hayes?" Rodriguez said, his voice softening as he addressed his old commander. "Sir?" Franklin's face lit up with recognition and relief. "Master Chief Rodriguez? Son? What brings you here today, sir?" "I came for cancer treatment, Rodriguez. My VA doctor referred me here for oncology services, but—" Franklin gestured toward Karen, who was beginning to realize that she had made a terrible mistake. Rodriguez turned back to Karen, and his expression was colder than anything she had ever encountered. "Johnson," he said, reading her name tag, "I want to make sure I understand this situation correctly. You've been refusing medical treatment to this gentleman?" "Well, not refusing exactly," Karen stammered, "but we have policies about veteran patients and—" "Policies?" Rodriguez interrupted. "What policies specifically allow you to discriminate against patients based on their age, veteran status, and insurance type?" Karen's face went pale as she realized the legal implications of what Rodriguez was suggesting. "I wasn't discriminating. I was just explaining our procedures." "Your procedures," Rodriguez repeated slowly, "which apparently include telling patients that they don't belong here because they're elderly veterans with Medicare insurance." By now, the other 5 SEALs had noticed the confrontation and moved closer to support their former commander and their teammate. The sight of 6 highly trained warriors surrounding the reception desk was unmistakable, even though they made no threatening gestures. "Sir, I think there's been a misunderstanding," Karen said, desperately trying to backtrack. "I was just trying to direct Colonel Hayes to the most appropriate care." "The most appropriate care," Rodriguez said, "would be the cancer treatment his doctor prescribed, which brought him to this hospital. Unless you're suggesting that his doctor was wrong to refer him here." Karen found herself trapped in a logical corner. Either she had to admit that she was discriminating against Franklin, or she had to insult the judgment of a physician who had referred him to St. Mary's. I was just following standard procedures," she said weakly. "Standard procedure?" Rodriguez's voice rose slightly, taking on the tone he had used when addressing subordinates who had failed in their duties. "Show me where in your standard procedures it says to refuse treatment to decorated veterans because of their age." "Decorated vet," Karen repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Rodriguez reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Let me read you something, Miss Johnson. This is from the official military database." He began scrolling through information about Franklin's service record. "Colonel Franklin Hayes, United States Army, Korean War veteran, Silver Star for exceptional gallantry in action. Vietnam War veteran, Purple Heart for wounds received in combat. Bronze Star for heroism during the rescue of 23 American soldiers under enemy fire. The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the background noise of the medical center seemed to fade away as people processed what they were hearing. This man, Rodriguez continued, his voice gaining strength and moral authority, risked his life repeatedly to save other American soldiers. He spent 45 years serving his country with distinction. And you've been treating him like he's some kind of charity case who doesn't deserve basic medical care. Karen's hands were shaking now. I didn't know. He didn't tell me he was a decorated veteran. He shouldn't have to tell you, Rodriguez replied sharply. Every patient who walks through these doors deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their military service. But the fact that you've been discriminating against a decorated war hero makes this situation even more inexcusable. Franklin had been standing quietly through this exchange, watching his former subordinate defend his honor in a way that reminded him of their days in service, when Rodriguez had always stood up for what was right. Rodriguez, Franklin said softly, it's okay. I can find treatment elsewhere. No, sir, it's not okay, Rodriguez replied firmly. You came here for medical treatment that your doctor prescribed. You're going to receive that treatment, and you're going to receive it with the respect and dignity that every patient deserves. He turned back to Karen, who was now visibly trembling. Ms. Johnson, I want to speak with your supervisor immediately, and I want to speak with the hospital administrator, and I want to speak with whoever is responsible for training staff in patient relations and anti-discrimination policy. Sir, I can try to find someone, but you're not trying anything, Rodriguez interrupted. You're going to get your supervisor right now, or I'm going to call the hospital's board of directors directly and explain to them exactly what kind of discrimination is happening in their lobby. Within minutes, Dr. Elena Martinez, the hospital's chief administrator, appeared in the lobby. She was a professional woman in her 50s who had been running St. Mary's Medical Center for nearly a decade, and she immediately sensed that something serious was happening. What seems to be the problem? Dr. Martinez asked, looking between Rodriguez, Franklin, and the obviously distressed Karen. The problem, Rodriguez said, is that your staff member has been refusing medical treatment to this decorated veteran based on his age, veteran status, and insurance type. She told him that elderly veterans with Medicare don't belong here, and that his military service was probably exaggerated. Dr. Martinez's expression shifted immediately from professional concern to alarm. I'm sorry, what did you say? Your staff member, Rodriguez continued, has been engaging in clear discrimination against a patient who was referred here by his physician for cancer treatment. She told him to go to the VA hospital because this facility doesn't treat elderly veteran patients with complicated stories. Dr. Martinez turned to Karen, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Is this true? Karen opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The evidence was overwhelming, and dozens of patients had witnessed the entire exchange. Dr. Martinez, Rodriguez said, I'd like you to meet Colonel Franklin Hayes, United States Army, retired, Korean War veteran, Silver Star, Vietnam War veteran, Purple Heart and Bronze Star, a 45-year record of distinguished service to his country. Dr. Martinez's face went pale as she realized the magnitude of what had happened. Not only had her staff engaged in illegal discrimination, but they had done it to a decorated war hero in front of dozens of witnesses, many of whom had been recording the interaction. Colonel Hayes, Martinez said, turning to Franklin with genuine respect and concern, I sincerely apologize for the treatment you've received here today. This is absolutely unacceptable, and I assure you that we will take immediate action to correct this situation. What kind of action? Rodriguez asked, his voice still carrying the authority of someone who demanded accountability. First, Dr. Martinez said, Colonel Hayes will receive the medical treatment he came here for, immediately and with the highest level of care. Second, we will be conducting a full investigation into this incident and implementing additional training for all staff members on patient rights and anti-discrimination policies. And third, Rodriguez pressed. Martinez looked at Karen, who was still standing behind the reception desk looking like she wanted to disappear. Third, there will be appropriate disciplinary action taken against any staff member found to have violated our patient care standards. But Rodriguez wasn't finished. Martinez, I think you should know that this incident has been recorded by several patients, and I suspect it will be shared widely on social media. This isn't just about one patient being mistreated. This is about systemic issues in how your hospital treats certain types of patients. Martinez nodded grimly. I understand, Master Chief. We take these matters very seriously, and we will conduct a thorough review of our policies and procedures to ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. I hope you will, Rodriguez, because Colonel Hayes isn't just my former commanding officer. He's a hero who saved 23 American lives in Vietnam, and he deserves better than what he received here today. The crowd that had gathered in the lobby began to applaud. Several patients approached Franklin to shake his hand and thank him for his service. The atmosphere had shifted completely from discrimination and humiliation to recognition and respect. Karen Johnson was quietly escorted away from the reception desk by hospital security. Her employment at St. Mary's Medical Center effectively over. The video recordings of the incident would indeed go viral, leading to nationwide conversations about discrimination in healthcare and the treatment of veterans. Franklin received his cancer treatment that day, along with a formal apology from the hospital's board of directors. St. Mary's Medical Center implemented comprehensive new training programs for all staff members and established clear protocols for treating every patient with dignity and respect. Rodriguez and his fellow SEALs rekindled their relationship with their former commander that day, meeting regularly to support him through his cancer treatment. But more importantly, Franklin never again faced discrimination when seeking medical care. The incident had made him locally famous, and his story became a symbol of the courage and sacrifice of all veterans. The hospital staff learned a valuable lesson that day about the importance of treating every patient with respect, regardless of their appearance, age, or insurance type. They discovered that heroes don't always look like what people expect them to look like, and that true honor comes from serving others, not from judging them. Franklin Hayes had saved 23 lives on the battlefields of Vietnam, but on that day at St. Mary's Medical Center, 6 Navy SEALs had saved something equally important: his dignity, his faith in the system he had served, and his belief that justice could still prevail when good people stood up for what was right. The incident lasted less than an hour, but its impact would be felt for years to come. It was a reminder that discrimination has no place in health care, that veterans deserve respect and honor regardless of their age, and that sometimes it takes people with authority and courage to stand up for those who have already given so much for their country. In the end, Mary's Medical Center became a better institution because of what happened that day. They learned that every patient has a story, every person deserves dignity, and every veteran has earned the right to be treated as a hero, no matter what they look like or how old they are. If this story moved you, remember to honor the veterans in your community, regardless of their age or circumstances. Subscribe for more stories of courage and justice, and share this reminder that real heroes come in all forms and deserve recognition for their sacrifice.